Encuentro de epistemología del ser humano
Encounter of the epistemology. Wolfgang Dietrich, researcher of peace and a politician. He gives a cathedra in the UNESCO and the director of the program of Magistracy and Studies of Peace from the University of Innsbruck. The many pieces of the of the individual and relational coexistence.
Bueno, muy buenos días. Yo creo que vivimos un día muy interesante ayer y teníamos una comienzo fulminante.
Interesting day yesterday. We had a very interesting start. And I have the opportunity of relating me with all these presentations we had yesterday. And I would love to continue in Spanish. But as everything is prepared by the live stream in English, I won't be able to direct me to you in my language and in your language, so I will change to English. De nuevo, en inglés, buenos días. Mi tema.
Conviviality, ego, team, and theme behavior in conflict transformation, which gives me the possibility to relate a little bit to all the topics of yesterday. I will basically talk about these topics in applied conflict work and how we prepare people for this type of work in our program at the University of Innsbruck, which has a certain reputation in innovative didactics, because what we want to create, what we want to educate, is people who do applied conflict work. So I could start from what we heard yesterday, especially in Henry's presentation. I think what he does, I was very impressed by this presentation. I think what he does is basically elicitive conflict transformation. This word, elicitive conflict transformation, comes from an North American peace researcher, probably the best known in the world at the moment, and somebody who is very popular, I guess, also here in Colombia, very well known, Jean-Paul Lederach. And I refer to this type of work because it gives us a first understanding of what our goal, our objective in Innsbruck is, and on the other hand, a general understanding of conflict work. The official definition of this particular word, elicitive, what is elicitive? If you look in the dictionary, you will not find that word. The native speakers will ask, well, what's that? That doesn't exist. Yes, it is an artificial word that Jean-Paul coined in the 1990s. And this is the literal definition that I took from his book from 1995. But the main point for understanding, and I think here in Colombia people understand very well, is that we do not presume that the conflict worker is the expert of the conflict. We always presume that the transformative energy of a conflict can only be found in the relation of the parties, and it is the job of the parties to transform, to find alternative options of encounter in their lives. Therefore, an expert is a person who does not involve him or herself into the relations of the parties. So what then is conflict work? Conflict work then is, and we have learned a great lesson yesterday in Henry's presentation, is a person who is able to provide a frame for this encounter, because parties means these are people who have more or less serious troubles with each other, who hate each other, who like to kill each other, who have gone through atrocities. And, well, I don't have to comment on that here in Colombia. So these are the parties. Now, the conflict worker in this understanding is the one who says, well, we create a space where you can meet and you can play with each other, you can try each other, and you can try to find different styles of, now I come to Carlos, I will come several times to you, different forms of communication, different forms of signals that we send to each other in order to feel after that a little bit more comfortable. Here is an important point for understanding peace work. Since I arrived here in Colombia about a week ago, I at least have been asked 10 times, so, you're a peace researcher, so what is your solution? How do you think we can resolve the conflict in Colombia? Then I can only refer to an old Indian wisdom and say even the largest journey begins with the first step. Yeah, so I don't have an answer. I don't have a clue how to resolve the Colombian conflict. I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what Colombia is. This is an idea, not only for me, but also for all the Colombians. Nobody in Colombia knows all the Colombians and the whole country and all the realities and relations of the whole country. So we don't know. Therefore, let's be a little bit more humble. Let's do the first step first. And, for example, focus on what is not so comfortable, what is not so nice in the relation between you and me. And conflict workers are simply people who provide the frame that allow the parties to explore that. Now, having said that, the next thing that I have to say about elicitive conflict workers is that this type of job or of activity requires many more subtle skills than the prescriptive approach. Prescriptive is you learn certain things, you know how to handle the machine, and then you just do it. That's pretty easy. This is what universities usually are doing. They educate people for manipulating certain aspects of the machine. Elicitive conflict transformation requires qualities in a person that allows to relate with the parties on all aspects of human conditions, of human reality. That's much more, and I come again to Carlos, great that you sit right in front of me. You remind me of the topics. So this requires much more than intellectual knowledge. That requires much more than just knowing things. Of course, it includes that, but it requires more. So the question is, how do we relate in all the other realities of human encounter? We have just heard now this fantastic presentation. So imagine you have to leave one aspect that most of us are used to away, and how do you relate? Yes, we have so many more possibilities, and most of the time we are not aware of them. So in our program, we try to train precisely that. Of course, also the rational aspects and the cognitive aspects, but all the other aspects of human beings. That is what we want to do. And how we designed our curriculum and what the didactical principles are. Because what we know, what we learned is that just the presence of the conflict worker, again I refer to Henry, the very presence of the conflict worker on the spot changes the situation. So we all know that when you feel that you are observed, even if the observer doesn't do anything, you change your behavior. Yeah, so we have to be aware of that, because where do we take the right from and how do we get involved into the affairs of other people, since conflict work can never be neutral. Neutral would mean that you don't have any impact. No, your very presence already is an effect. Therefore, we have to be all partisan, what means that we work for the benefit of everybody involved, which is sometimes not that easy, because some of the people are quite disgusting, have done horrible things. So we don't take the side of the victims, but we focus on the relation. So how can this relation be held? How can this relation be balanced and changed? Now, for talking about that, it's again your turn. You will be delighted now. I have to refer to your friend Albert and just invite you to take this wave-particle duality. I think that everybody has learned in college or in high school. Just remember that and what he says in quantum mechanics about that. The real interesting thing here is that we have objects that can be waves, or not can be, that are waves and particles simultaneously, and what they are depends on the perspective of the observer. Was this correct? Passed? Thank you very much. So, good. So, with that, I mean, first of all, for a conventional human mind, this is a challenge. Because it seems to be a contradiction. This is somehow strange. We cannot really get it, right? So I don't know how many of you struggled with that and in the end left it for the teachers to be happy with that. So I invite you just for taking that as a metaphor, and maybe you will see in the end it's much more than a metaphor if we talk about peace and conflict work. Because now I shift a little bit. This would be for Mark, who is not here in a moment, but he would love that. I refer to Martin Buber, who is the founder of this individual relational duality, the philosophy of dialogue, as it is called. And here we learn something very important. And again, remember what you just have heard some minutes ago. Through the person, through the thou, a person becomes a I. I am because you are. I heard a lot about the philosophy of colegiatura in the last 2 days. So the question here is then, what is an individual? Is an individual really individual, or is an individual relational? This has a lot to do with our understanding of peace. I don't have the time today here. I have not been invited to talk about the many pieces, but we start from the presumption that peace is constructed in the minds of human beings, as UNESCO says in the preamble of its constitution, so that therefore peace has to be a plural word. Las paces. You can say that in Spanish. It's not so easy in English. Yeah. So, but with Martin Buber we come closer. So he says, I am because you are. And this is the foundation for everything that later would be called humanistic psychology, and also the main principle of peace studies. The point here is, what are we interested in? What is our object of interest? Our object of interest is the relation. If it is true that the consciousness, again, another word, we will have that. The consciousness of the self means that I need you in order to construct a self-understanding inside of me. Then peace is all about relations. Yeah, there is not one single isolated peaceful person in the world. Per definition, it can't be. It is about our relations. How do we relate to each other? So in principle, the philosophy of dialogue draws a triangle of the I, the you, or the thou, as he says, and the it, the object. So we constantly create our identity by that. We don't have an identity, but we can only constantly identify. Yeah? Identity is the result of identification, but there is no identity behind identification. So what is a self? A self does never exist per se. A self is always the result of experiences that make us. Again, we have to turn around the grammar. Not we make experiences, but experiences make us who we are. So if we are unpeaceful, which means we are somehow in unrest, we are not happy, we are creating troubles for others or whatsoever, we have to focus on the experience that makes the troublemaker a troublemaker. And we should not have just judgments, opinions about the troublemaker. Nobody has been born as a troublemaker. I'm Austrian. I can tell you that even Adolf Hitler has been born naked and innocent. So he's the result of experience who made him the monster that he was in the end. He has not been born as a monster. And this goes for everybody. That goes for all the ones who did a lot of bad things, horrible things in our society. So coming back to your point, Carlos, when you explored sex and drugs and rock and roll for this young generation here, psychologist Ruth Cohn, a psychotherapist actually, Ruth Cohn invented in the same atmosphere, I would say, eating, sucking the knowledge from the same overall vibes that were in the air, a communication model that is called theme-centered interaction. And you can see easily that she just took from Buber the pattern. And she asked, well, if we work in groups, and now I come to your main demand from yesterday, how can we change curricular didactics of universities in order to address the challenges of our time of the 21st century? So how can we jump from the 19th to the 21st century? Yeah, it's pretty much, I share all that you, and very happy with all that you said. Now I try and answer. The point here is, she says, well, students means these are people who are organized in groups. And they find people who are more experienced, and we call those people professors or teachers. So what we need in a learning atmosphere is general, this triangle, and it means it should be a balanced triangle of the I, the we, and the theme, these three things. Meaning, we have a topic, the seminar, the workshop, the lecture has a topic. We meet for the purpose of learning this, what is named in the title. And this will have content, hopefully, yeah? So, but we learn the best, here I come again to your point, we learn the best when we also balance the relation between the I and the we. So we have to be aware of a group of students is not just a chain of individuals, but is constantly interacting. And we can use this interaction for the raising the result of the learning experience, because since it is all about consciousness here at Collegiatura, what does it mean? The Latin word conscientia means what we know together. What we know together. So that means learning in a group is generally beneficial and better than learning alone. But this requires a certain didactical understanding. We have to turn away from the 20th century spell of this competition brings the best results. That's a quasi-religious belief. That's nothing that has an evidence. We learn the best in cooperative manner because we are made to that. Our brain is made for that. So consciousness means we need didactics that allow us to get the best possible result of this particular group that is present in the learning process. That's very different. The question comes up, how do we grade? How will we transfer the credits and all of these things? But this is a didactical principle that is completely up to date with everything that we know scientifically. So, and additionally, which is very clear, we, the universities and the professors, we have to create an environment that facilitates the learning experience. If you look to the aulas, to the rooms, to the seminar rooms that many universities in the world, around the globe, offer, this is not good learning environment. Because, for example, you cannot move. You cannot use the whole human system in order to learn. You reduce it to the perceiving senses passively and swallowing knowledge. So this has to be changed, and in some places it is changed. I have the impression that the attempts at least, or maybe also with some success, this is what happens here, but it is not the normal case if we talk about universities in the world. Now this thing doesn't work anymore. Does it? Yeah. So, what I want to talk about now a little bit is about these didactical principles that we apply in Innsbruck in order to produce elicitive conflict workers, people who are able to relate with all human aspects to the parties once they turn into professional peace workers. So we have again the same pattern that you have seen before. I just have changed some names because the most important is on the one hand that I now call the individual the ego, because we have a lot to do with ego aspects in piecework in general. Piecework is very sexy. It's easy to be a hero in piecework, yeah? So this attracts narcissistic people. People with big ego, people who like the applause that they get and the recognition that they get for what they are doing. Oh, you go into the wild, you work with these people. You know, for example, I experience very often, I work a lot at the moment in Iraq. Wow, you go to Iraq, you are a hero, yeah? Well, I'm not a hero at all, there's nothing heroic there, yeah? And I'm pretty much concerned that I'm safe when I go there, yeah? So, but, I mean, this attracts these kind of people who are vain, who are jealous, and so on. We have to work with this ego in the foundation training, which means before the pre-deployment training of peace workers, in order to balance that to a normal amount. Then team is crucial because nowadays peace work almost exclusively happens in teams. I'm more involved in international peace work. There you can see in the frame of the UN, since Austria is a neutral state, we always are focused on the UN system. In the UN system, the main reason, the principal reason for the failure of peace missions is team burnout. Take that, yeah? So we fail because the teams collapse, not because of the objective problems, the outside problems. So going to Colombia, going to Iraq, going to whatever country you want to take, that's not such a big deal. The big deal is how you balance a team of a few people. They collapse because they are not able to relate to each other. A lot of big egos, worst of all, a male alpha animal as a leader, and you can predict that this will go down. So that's the main point why we are doing that. And we can learn, this has also been mentioned already yesterday, so I can make it brief. I mentioned Buber, who came basically from a Jewish philosophical background. Here you have a different approach with the same result, Ubuntu. This word became very popular in the context of the balancing, transforming the apartheid system in South Africa. It is a cultural word that belongs to this region, and it says, surprise, surprise, I am because we are. So I can only be an individual in relation to you. If so, I have to learn to be a social being. That's not so easy. And it's not good to learn, compete, and always focus on your own profit and benefit. So now this is the next one. I had to have something also for you. Yeah, here we jump to India. And I just want to call your attention to the last line here of this slide. It is again a principle that we use. It's always the same story. We have to work in universities, and I would say in social sciences more than in others, to draw the attention of the students from the ego consciousness to the we consciousness. Hanuman may help us with that. Yeah? So it's another symbol for the same story. Okay, so let's go back to Albert. If we now take what we have learned from him before as a metaphor for the transrational peace philosophy that we apply in Innsbruck, then we can say that we, the human beings, are simultaneously individuals and relations. So I do here not deny that we are individuals, of course, yeah. The human consciousness works in that way that we always have an I consciousness. I exist, and in a way, this also has a lot to do with grammar, to your the great founder of modern grammar in Europe. You may know, everybody, that Antonio de Nebrija was the created in the year, very interesting year, 1492. He presented the first grammar of a modern European language, which was Castellano, and he informed the Catholic Queen that he has a weapon which is more powerful than the cannons and the artillery of the Turks in the East. And he was right. Because the way we speak, the way we get addressed in our life when we are born innocent and naked, of course, creates our perception, the instruments for the perception of the world. So if I live in a grammar that constantly says, I am, I do, I have, I want, I will identify with the I. That's how our brain works. Tell the brain that I exist constantly, and you are the best, you are the most beautiful, you are, I don't know, the most important one, then people in the end have to believe, because that's the consequence of the brain function. So, but simultaneously, what we just said, we are relations, and we are influenced by all the experiences that make us constantly. Of course, the early experiences in a human life have much more impact than the later ones. So more or less from the 4th, 5th, 7th year onwards, we tend to repeat what we have learned before. It's very boring in human life, the rest of after that. So, but we are coined, we are made by that. Now, is this a contradiction? That's the question. How can we deal with this double nature, double characteristic of human existence? And here I come now to academic learning. Let us see how we apply this foundation for the learning process. First of all, let's rely simply on the state of the art of neuroscience and pedagogy. Quite simple thing. I think it will not be new for you here, for the rector here, but it will maybe just be, it is necessary to remember these things. So if we watch children playing, and if they are not spoiled by institutions that we call kindergarten or school, so if we just let them do what nature tells them to do or makes them to do, then we see that learning is a threefold process. First of all, no surprise, it is intellectual and cognitive apprehending. So learning means there comes an information and I understand. Bad news for all the universities in the world, or most of the universities in the world, that's not the end of the story. So far universities are great. They send a lot of information to the students, right? Second one, practicing the apprehended notion. I mean, children play. What does it mean when they play? That means they understood something and then they try to do it. Playing involves the whole psychosomatic system. So they play with the whole existence, with the whole system, yeah? Not only with the brain, not only with some cells that have understood. But they do it, they rehearsal until they know how to apply the apprehended content. And now something else is missing, and this has a lot to do with the ethics of academic teaching, since I basically talk about academics, is discerning the relevance for further use. So teaching the students things and making them, even giving them trainings to do the things, if they don't see the relevance for their further life, they will forget right after the exam. And this is what happens. Yeah? I mean, I have done certain studies in my life, like you, and I know how much I have forgotten. Well, I don't know what I have forgotten, but I know that it was an enormous amount of knowledge that could have been used. But I didn't see the relevance. You go to an exam, you just tell them your poems, and you leave and you forget. Yeah? So then something is wrong didactically. Yeah, that's wasting time. Why are we doing that? Why do we learn something just blah, blah, blah and forget it again. Why should we do that? So we need didactics that take this into consideration, and we have to offer the students something that is relevant for their life, and they also must have the choice, because the professors or the university cannot know what is relevant for the individual lives of the students later. But the students have to make decisions, and that's, for example, the responsibility of being a student. Yeah, I have to reflect, do I need that? Does this help me? Do I want to work with that later on? So yes, I go to the lectures or go to the seminars, go to the workshops and do it because I need that and that's relevant. I will never forget it. Or am I just going there for passing and getting my credits? So when we agree on this, this is how the human brain works. We cannot really discuss that. This is given to us by nature. So, what is the consequence for that? First of all, we need didactics that focus on the significance and enthusiasm instead of reward and punishment. It is not interesting who is the best in the class. It's not interesting who is the idiot of the class. The interesting point is what can we learn together, what do we achieve, and being together, doing it together, since we are relational beings, that's very sexy, that's attractive. Yeah, that brings us together. That is motivation. The second is learning as a holistic process that involves mind and body, body and mind. You are happy now? We will go deeper into that in the next presentation. Yes, of course. But we need aulas that make that possible. We need didactics. We need professors who dare to do that. Because sometimes it does not look too academic in a conventional sense. What I heard just before I started in the break, yeah, when the teacher tells you, please get off your shoes, we are going to dance in an academic seminar. Yeah, you are going to smell the sweat of your peers. Yeah, that's quite instructive to do that. Yeah. Learning as a communal and cooperative experience, that's what I already said. Okay, so now, what we found, since we are teaching, I don't have too much time anymore, so I have to be short. We have between 30 and 40 students in our seminars, in our classes. We mix the students. We have students from all over the world. And we mix also the disciplines. So students from all licenciaturas or bachelors will be accepted, whatever the discipline is, so we can even have people from science or from arts or whatsoever. They are all welcome, and they come. And we have, people from all over the world, all cultures, all religions, all academic disciplines, and we even mix the semesters. So that means we always have a mix of advanced students with beginners, so that they can support each other. And what we find is now, and I think that's the most interesting point, how a semester works. Our students live together. They spend each semester 2 months without any break, no weekend, no free night or whatever, together. And they learn a lot about each other by doing that. They have all the meals together, so everything together. Now, what happens is when they come, the beginners come, usually we have this notion of competition in the classes. Why? Well, because the students come spoiled from their previous studies. I mean, wherever they are, they learn constantly to be the best. Yeah? And if you want a scholarship for the program in Innsbruck, you have to be the best in your bachelor program at home. Yeah? So they come with this notion, and they have a hard time at the beginning to believe that this is not what is welcome here, what is wanted here. The second is that I have here the Latin words because I think they are very instructive and illustrative. So the second is compassio, which is interesting. So compassion, of course, in English. Feeling the sorrow of the other, feeling sorrow by the suffering of the others, which means I can feel your pain. How can I feel your pain? How can this be content of an academic learning? Well, I have to be trained because I can only feel what I know. If I don't have a clue how your pain feels, I will not feel it. That's one of the main problems of the youth in the 21st century, when the kids grow up isolated in these typical environments related more to electronics than to real human beings. Then they have a hard time to reading the bodies, to reading the signals that tell us the other one suffers. So this is part of the process in this group development, that we go into a certain phase of compassion. Even harder is the third one, which I call now in Latin consors, compater, or complex. We don't have a word for that, neither in Spanish nor in English. These are all somehow attempts to help myself. The proper word in English would be compersion, but it's used in a different environment. What it simply means is empathic joy, is now what I said before about the pain, about the joy. I can feel your joy. I can feel your pleasure. And I tell you that we had students from more than 80 countries in our program, and they have, most of them, has a real hard time with that. Why? Because we don't learn that in our societies. Your joy means that you won. It's your success. So I have to be depressed because I lost. I'm not as good as you if you have joy. This is an underlying information that young people grow up with in these patriarchal capitalist societies, and therefore getting to this point where I can really feel, I feel the joy because you feel the joy, that's a hard time. Then the last one, the fourth one, the last one that we have in the presence phase is conscientia, already mentioned, what we know together. So at the end of the semester, we want to be satisfied together because we achieved so much together. That means also we, the professors, we can celebrate because our group performed really well, and the students go and see the relevance of the experience for their further life. And this has a consequence, consecutio. Yeah? So what we do shall have an impact on the later life. So I just saw these warning signals, therefore this is what I already mentioned. So our didactics mean that not the students make experience, but we prepare the safe frame didactically where they can experience all the things that I have mentioned, in order to make them able to do that with the parties later in the applied conflict work, to go with the same idea, with the same notion into that. And for doing so, well, I have to refer here to another of your heroes, I guess, Paulo Freire from Brazil, very well known, globally known educator, who said, this doesn't work? Yes, now. Who said that you do not know about yourself what you have not tested. So we all have a lot of fantasies, of concepts, stereotypes, prejudices about ourselves, and think and believe that we cannot do it. Whatever. We cannot. I cannot climb, I cannot swim, I cannot solve this assignment, I cannot do this or that. And studying means to test it. Yeah, if I say I cannot swim, but I never tried it, how shall I know? So human beings by nature can swim, so we just have to try, we have to apply it. What are universities for? What are schools, what are kindergartens for? Well, make them test it, make them try it, make them play with it, and what you get is people who leave the university and say, yes, I'm able, I can, I have tested it. Plus, I know the limits of myself. I know there are some things that I really cannot do it, and I know it because I tested it. That's very clear in physical aspects. If I say how fast can I run, sooner or later I will, even with training, I will get my limits. But if it comes to emotional things, to spiritual questions, to mental questions, to psychological questions, to sexual questions, what do we really know about ourselves? Yeah, we do not know very much about ourselves, but we are sure that we cannot. So I think university training programs have to be there for enlarging this understanding of ourselves. How many do I have a minute still? Yeah, 2. Wow, great. So then I will just show you these two slides, just telling you, well, again, what is the goal of the didactical principles? We see here with this in this diagram that there are aspects of ourselves that we know and that we want to sell to the others. So like here in this room for the moment, everybody watches me, and you perceive certain things about me. These are things that I know and that I want to show you. This is our cooperation zone. We can interact on this field. Then there are things that I know about myself, but I really don't want to show you. I don't want to tell you. I have my secrets. Yeah, I'm not that nice as you think. So I'm not showing you that, but I know it. Then there are aspects that I'm not aware of, but you perceive them. Because you are equipped with human senses, as we have heard before, so you feel things about me that I'm not aware of. And there are aspects that nobody of us knows. So just with finishing with this last slide here. Now, what is the reality of university's life? That students come with rather small cooperation zones. Usually we tend to hide. We have learned that it's not safe to present ourselves openly, which reduces our chances in our relations. I think the most important goal, especially in peace studies, but I think that goes for all disciplines, is the enlargement of the cooperation zone. I think that's our responsibility as institutions, as professors, as teachers, as rectors, that we give a frame where the students can explore the cooperation zones, that they do what you said yesterday, that they play with sex and drugs and rock and roll. And I mean, academically, intellectually, yes, this has to happen. This gives us a better understanding of ourselves, and this is the quality, the virtue of academic life. In peace studies, it is, well, I cannot use that anymore. In peace studies, it is super important, because only when we have this experience that all these aspects are ours and we know how we function, only then we can relate to the parties. When we see a conflict and come into the scene, we can not only see the surface, the scandal, the violence, but we can see the human qualities behind it. The surface is not the truth. The truth is all the underlying inner layers of human existence and relations. Thank you very much. Thank you also for your patience.